Hey Bip Kids, BipSeb here. Today I'll be going over a code review from the Wild West of Big Tech. Um, Today I'm going to be talking about something I'm pretty passionate about, which is clean code. For those of you that don't know, it's just like a set of ideas or principles that you want to employ when you're trying to write code that's going to be readable and reusable in the future. To me, this is one of the most important things there are. Like if your code's not reusable or readable, it's basically garbage. It should go in the garbage. So if you're new, hang tight, buckle in, and you're going to be learning, some new concepts today. If you're experienced with clean code and ideas around clean code, feel free to skip this video. Now, without further ado, here's the first comment in the code review that I wrote. The first comment states, I think the naming is quite poor here. How do I benefit from knowing this is a weight restriction around p condition 1 and not a weight restriction from p condition 2 variable? The comment may not seem to align with the code just because there's some additional lines of code that you don't see, but essentially you have in the code length restriction from p condition 1, length restriction from p condition 2, and then the same thing with weight restriction. Seeing a variable ending in 1 or 2 doesn't really give me any useful information. I think it's quite poor naming. One of the most important things when writing clean code is having good variable names. Good variable names will allow the reader to figure out what's going on without even having read all the code. So personally, I would have named this something like length restriction greater than 96 inch. Just by reading the variable name, you already know what the object's going to be. Of course, if this is a giant object, you don't want a giant name covering every detail, but ideally you'd have some other name, some other high level name that encapsulates all that stuff into one tiny word, and the word being your variable name. Moving on to the next comment I have written down, can you make this more modular? This file is way too big, bro. And you see that the line number is 206. I'm actually going to skip back to the next comment because they're related. The next comment says, same as above, please refactor the scanning of Hanbro. So you see that the line number is 287, which suggests that this file is easily approaching 300 lines. This is too long. Ideally, you want your files all to be short so that they're quick and easy to understand. Of course, you don't want every file to be too short. Like if you have 1,000 one-line files, that's bad too, because you're gonna have to open up 1,000 files just to read the code. But there's a balance. There's a fine balance. And I'd say that typically you're looking between 50 to a max of like 150 lines of code. That way, the number of files to read won't be that many, and for the files they do have to read, they won't be so long, so they won't take too much time to understand. In the next code comment, I crack a joke. To be clear, people don't usually crack jokes in code review comments, and I'd argue that software developers lack the social skills to even make jokes. But anyway, with all that aside, the comment says, this name killed President Lincoln. What is an item item? Oh my god. So the problem with this line of code is that it introduces the concept of item item, which doesn't exist. Nobody knows what an item is. I doubt many people can even infer, like guess, what is an item item. You don't sell item items. You don't look after item items. You don't think about item items. This is a bad name. Don't name don't name any of your variables item, please. It's quite similar to naming a variable item, data, info, and kind of vague, arbitrary words like this. Strive for something that's meaningful. So a bad example would be a variable named truck item info data item. A good variable name would be something like truck passengers. It's quite obvious that the variable is referring to some passengers of the truck. The next code review comment is pretty innocent. It's just an extra space character at the end of the line. It's likely that the person who wrote this code was just having a long day and they just wanted to clock out. I completely understand. That really happened to me yesterday. And yeah, we just look to make sure we don't make these tiny mistakes, because these tiny mistakes add up and then we end up with a heaping pile of garbage at the end of the day. We want to maintain high standards. The final code review comment touches upon a few principles. I wrote, can you move the data to a separate JavaScript file? This makes my future kids cry for cleaner code. So although you can't get the whole picture with just the code at the top, just that one line, essentially what's going on is that you had some bad JavaScript testing. Here's a screenshot to illustrate what I mean in more detail. So this is an example of some bad testing in JavaScript. At the top of the file you have test expect result, which is this large object describing what's the expected result when running a function. And then you have this test input, which is also long, which is what you want to feed into the function under test to compare with the expected result. So you see on the third line that you call function to test with test input to get a result. You then feed into results to this special function JavaScript that allows you to compare your results. So we're comparing the result with the test expected result. While this setup isn't so bad, the main issue is that this file is kind of polluted in the sense that in order to just understand the test mechanism, the function to test line, and then the validate result line, you have to first read through all the annoying lines of the JavaScript objects defining test input and expected output. Ideally, you would only use your time understanding how the test works, not reading through the data of the input and the output. So here I have another screenshot of a better approach. So in this approach, you move the expected results and test inputs to another file. So if in this file we have potentially many tests, you won't have a file that's littered with lots of large data objects for inputs and outputs. So for example, let's say I want to understand test 1 of many tests in this file. So I plug in test input 1, which is imported from another file called testinputs.javascript, and I get a result. After I get a result, I'll compare it to test expected result 1, which is again from yet another data file. All those files contain data. So from the expected result JavaScript file, I have the test expected result and then compare it with what I get from my function. The beauty of this approach is that if I understand how the tests work, I just have to look at the 2 lines. I don't have to read through all the lines of the data, which just kind of wastes my time and distracts me. What this approach highlights is modularization, which is to say you want to avoid just cramming everything into one giant GigaChad file. You want to break things up into logical files. And by doing this, you get a much easier to read set of files. If everything's in one file, good luck reading that. So that's going to do it for today, BibKids. Stay tuned for more videos about how to become a better software developer. I love you all. Hope you have a great day. Ciao. Bye-bye.